All right, so we've got a module. We've got some location within our Excel project that we can start to write and produce our own VBA code and automate our experience. Now that I've got a module, I want to start writing my own code. Well, you don't just jump into the document here and start banging on your keyboard. There's some very specific keywords and structure that VBA expects you to adhere to as you write your code. Well, earlier when we used the macro recorder, we just went into macro, we said record, we started recording. We didn't even worry about what Excel was doing because it was busy in the background writing everything down. Well, everything that Excel wrote down, all those various lines of code, like type in the word expense, type in the word Jan, Mar, February, total, and so on. All of that stuff that it wrote down, it put it in a module, but within that module, it put it within what's called a procedure. A procedure is really the macro. We called our macro add headers. So in reality, Excel created a procedure called add headers. And when we wanted to run add headers, we said run that macro or run this procedure called add headers. And it knew, okay, here's the start of the procedure, here's the start of the macro called add headers, and here's the end of it. Everything in between those two segments, where it starts and where it ends, is what it's going to do. So before we write any of our code, we got our module, but now we need to insert a procedure, give the procedure a name, very similar to how you did it with macros, give it a name, and then we put our code inside of that procedure. This is great because you can have multiple procedures or macros and say, this macro, this procedure does these steps. Now we're done with that one. And now I'm going to create another procedure that does these steps. And we're going to put that one away. I can have multiple procedures and I can say, run procedure A. Now run procedure B. Skip C. We don't need that one this time. Let's go to D. I can create all these various procedures, put my code in there, kind of modularize your code, get one segment to do something really good, and then get another procedure to do something else really good. Okay, so let's insert a procedure. I got my module. Now I'm going to go back up to insert, and I'm going to insert a procedure. Now, just an FYI, if you're on a Mac, and you can write VBA inside of Excel on a Mac, some of the newer versions of the Mac version of Excel don't have the menus. So you can't go up to insert and say insert a procedure. Okay? It's just not there. I don't know why. I'm hoping that Microsoft and Apple get back together and say, we need to fix this. But just know some of the Mac versions, they remove some of the features inside of the VBA window. But not to worry, because what I'm going to do here is just a window, just an interface to get me started. You can just write this out yourself in reality. Okay? So first thing here, I'm just going to give it a name. I'm going to say fun with procedures. Now, you remember this? If you recorded a macro earlier, what could you not put inside the macro name? No spaces. Same with the procedure, because really a procedure is a macro. A macro is a procedure. They're one and the same. So no spaces. I called it fun with procedures. Now it's asking me for a little bit of information. Wants to know the type and the scope. First, the type. In our first few examples, we're going to deal with what are called sub-procedures. All a sub-procedure does is run lines of code, just actions. Do this, then do that, then do this, then do that, do this, that, and the other thing. That's all it's going to do is just run a bunch of actions. Like type into a cell, change the formatting, change the text color, delete data, whatever it might be. Just do that. Just a big to-do list. That's a sub-procedure. You have what's called a function. You work inside of Excel, you work with functions, things like the sum function, the average function. Well, they do things like do math or look up values, but Where they're different from a sub-procedure that just does stuff, a function does stuff, but then it returns a value back to you. Like, what's the sum of cell A5 through A10? Oh, it's 20. It gives you a value back. That's a function. Now, you've also got one called property. The scope of property is much larger than we got time for right now. And it's actually a much larger discussion point. So I'm not going to touch upon that right now. But sub and function, two of the more common ones, and sub procedures being the most common one. Then you got scope. This deals with where the procedure is going to be available at, or where you can use it. We got a project. We got a project called Book 1. We've created a module, got defaulted called Module 1, and now we're putting a procedure inside of that module. Well, if I leave the scope to public, Fun with Procedures, this procedure that we're creating right now, is going to become available to any other procedure within this module or any other module that we create. It's public. You can use it anywhere within this project. Okay? Now, private, it's kind of the opposite. We've got the module. We're putting a procedure inside of that module. If you mark it as private, it's now only available within that module. If you create other modules, they're like, Fun with Procedures? I don't even know what that is. You better go look at the other module and find it there. Okay? It's private to that module. You can't use it anywhere else. Something to keep in mind. You can create some organization to your code. You can kind of isolate things from one another. So you got private, you got public. Default, see it right there? Procedures are marked as public. All right. So for us right now, Fun with Procedures, it's going to be a sub procedure and it's going to be public. I'll hit OK. And all this really does is kind of the foundational work. It's created the beginning of my procedure. It's called public sub Fun with Procedures, and then end sub. Now all of my code, everything that Fun with Procedure does, is going to go somewhere in between those two lines. So you got your VBA window. You got a module. That's where you store your code. Now you want to create some code. You store that code within a procedure within the module. So get that done. Again, all you need to do is go up to insert a procedure, give it a name, you're good to go. In reality, you could just type that out yourself. And in fact, you might end up doing that as you become more and more comfortable within Excel VBA. You'll just bang those lines out yourself manually. But get that done, the beginning of our procedure.